Stephen Bradshaw.
Thank you. Good afternoon. Oh my God, that was weak. Let's reload and try that again. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Much, much better. Thank you. Thank you so much for this opportunity. Thank you for that introduction. I've enjoyed getting to chat with Mark over the last few minutes, and I'm really proud and happy to be here. Now, I usually start these chats with asking the members of my audience to imagine something. Now, if you're married or in a committed relationship, imagine a circumstance where your spouse goes away on a business trip. Maybe it's overnight, a couple days, a week or so, however long it is. Think about the disruption that has on home life while a major member of the family is away. Little things. Who's gonna help the kids with their homework tonight? Who's gonna take Johnny to soccer practice? Who's gonna stop by the nursing home and visit mom? Now imagine a scenario where that spouse is gone for 6 months, a year, 15 months. Think about the disruption that has on home life while that member is away. Now on top of that, add that just as a byproduct of doing their job, that spouse has a very real risk of being hurt, permanently injured, or even killed and not returning home at all. Now imagine that it's a time before email, before texting, before Facebook and Skype and all of the modern means of communication we have available to us now, and all you're left with to try to maintain a relationship against that backdrop are good old-fashioned handwritten letters. Now this is how it was 20 plus years ago when I got deployed to the Middle East for the Gulf War, and my wife Diane was at our little apartment in Columbus, Georgia outside of Fort Benning trying to keep our home life going. And I can tell you it was a very trying and difficult times in our lives. We know people, friends of ours, whose marriages did not survive it. Now, for those of you in the audience today who are veterans, then of course you don't have to imagine what I'm talking about. All you need to do is remember it. And you can stand up and convey these sentiments just as well as I can. But I assure you, it's a trying time. Now, I was able to deploy to the Gulf, take care of business, so to speak, or return home physically unhurt. I spent a year and a half teaching at the Officer Candidate School, and then decided to resign my commission, move to Atlanta, start a career in business. I've had the chance to, do corporate sales, be an adjunct professor at a university. These days I'm on a project at the Centers for Disease Control, and while my military service is always a very big part of who I am as a person, that chapter in our lives was essentially closed. Fast forward to a few years ago, I was down in our basement doing something long neglected on my honey-do list, which was to try to organize a little bit down there. And off in a corner, in an unmarked box, I opened it to discover every single letter I'd written to my wife while I was deployed. Now, this is 16, 17 years after the fact. I'm not sure exactly what that says on my cleaning of the basement, diligence, but I can tell you that I was taken aback. I really didn't have any desire to go back and revisit that time in our lives. But, curiosity got the better of me, and I started to go through them, and it's funny to read your own words from so long ago. Sometimes you read things and you think, well, that was pretty forward-looking. Other times you read things and you think, I can't believe I was actually thinking that, let alone put it down on a piece of paper. But what emerged was an arc of the emotional roller coaster I was on as I went from landing in this desert to waiting month after month after month without really knowing anything, to finally coming to the realization that none of us were going to go home until we actually fought the Iraqis. And we decided to go forward and put it in the form of a book, which is, here's what it looks like. We're very proud of the way that it turns out. in the hopes that it gives other people hope and inspiration. Now, soldiers get a tremendous amount of praise, and rightly so. But I believe the story that gets underplayed is the heroism of the families that stay back here and keep things going while a loved one's in harm's way. Now, in addition to the letters themselves, I offer, with 20 years of hindsight and hopefully a little bit of humility, some thoughts on service, on sacrifice, and on love. And with the minutes I have remaining, those are the 3 points I'd just like to make. First of all, service. Now, Rotary is a service organization, so there's very little I can stand up here and tell you all about service in the macro sense. Instead, what I'd like to do is just share what my military service meant to me. I was very proud to be a soldier. Wearing this country's uniform is one of the best things I've ever done with my life. I'm so grateful that I had that opportunity. Now, I was born into a military family. My father, who's here with me today, spent a career in the United States Navy. He might be still trying to get over the fact that I went into the Army instead of the United States Navy. I think he's over it by now, but he served, and we're grateful for his service. My grandfather, his father, served during the World War II era. And as we all know, at that time, the American military was segregated. And at the time of my deployment, both of my brothers were potentially in harm's way as well. My older brother's Army unit was somewhere on the Arabian Peninsula. My younger brother's Georgia Army National Guard unit was at the National Training Center in California, preparing to go to the desert. Had the war lasted any length of time, he'd have been right over there with us. And when I think about that, I always wonder what my parents must have been going through at that time to know that all 3 of their sons were potentially in harm's way. Some lessons from that experience: certainly discipline, devotion to duty, learning how to deal with hardship. And at least for me, the most important thing is learning to subordinate yourself to something bigger. The mission always came first, and I carry those principles with me to this day. Now, I would be remiss if I didn't say a word about friendships. It's kind of hard to describe the bond that occurs between people when you go through something that intense together, but I can tell you there are a handful of guys that I know I'll be friends with to the day I die, no matter how much time passes when we're able to spend time together. So I'm grateful for those friendships. A word about sacrifice. Deployments are hard. They induce stress on multiple levels: relationship stress, financial stress, family stress. As we're met here this fine afternoon, we've got soldiers fighting in Afghanistan. Now, I would offer this to you for your consideration. About 1% of the American population is directly affected by the wars we're engaged in. Now think about that. We're a nation of over 300 million people. When you add up the number of people on active duty, Guard and Reserves, their immediate families, it's about 1% of the American population. Now, I don't know what, if anything, we as a people should do about that. I would simply suggest to you that that 1% bears a disproportionate share of the burden for the wars we choose to engage in. And it's certainly something to think about. Now, what I want to say next, I say with a bit of embarrassment. Okay, I'll just admit to a little embarrassment, because both of my grandfathers were ministers. In fact, my father's father pastored a church right here in Savannah for many years. So I'm very well versed in the ways of religion. But over the years, I've gotten to the habit where I don't go to church on Sunday like I should. Now, I've made a commitment this year to change that and join a church, and I've got it narrowed down to a couple of churches in the Atlanta area, and I'm going to pick one within the next month or so. But I've fallen into a habit over the years on Sunday mornings. I'm kind of a news junkie. You know, and where I live, at 8:30 is the McLaughlin Group, at 9 o'clock is Fox News Sunday, 10 o'clock is Meet the Press, and that's how my Sunday mornings have evolved for a number of years. Now there's a show that comes on at 11 a.m. in Atlanta called This Week on the ABC network. Now at the end of that show, they used to do a segment called In Memoriam, where they highlight the names of the famous people that have died that particular week. And then at the end of that segment, they would put up the names of the American soldiers that have died that week. If you all think back to when Iraq was going really poorly, that list was pretty numerous. And I can tell you, it was bothering me so much that I would either quickly change the channel or leave the room when that segment came on. Of course, I realized very quickly that I was doing those soldiers, those departed souls, the highest form of dishonor. It's easy to turn away from the things that don't please us. I don't do that anymore. Now I sit there and I watch it. And the presentation is very, very simple. It's the soldier's name, their rank, their hometown, their branch of service, and their ages. 18, 19, 22, 24. Never coming home again. And every now and then the ages are a little bit older, 38, 42. And for every one of those names, there's a mother or a father, or a child, or a spouse that grieves. Now, I don't stand before you on this glorious day in Savannah, Georgia, and share that with you to put anybody in a somber mood. That's not my intent. It's simply to underscore that the magnitude of that sacrifice is real. Certainly something to consider. Finally, a word on love. First of all, there's love for this beautiful city. When I graduated from Armstrong in 1986, was getting ready to go on active duty and leave Savannah, I was over Savannah. I was a young man full of himself. This town's too small, nothing happening. I'm happy to be getting out of here. I was wrong. I am so happy to be back here in Savannah. As Mark said, it's come up in my household lately that we've actually considered, either relocating back here or certainly moving here when we retire. Now, in my case, that's probably another 75, 80 years from now, but sooner or later, we'll get to that point. But I love being back in Savannah, so thank you for having me here. Certainly, there's love of spouse. Very, very fortunate in the spouse department. I'm grateful that she was married to me then, grateful that she's married to me now, grateful that she saved those letters, and extremely humbled and grateful that she allowed me, and I had to get permission, to share that small part of our history, and really that small part of American history, with the people at large. She's a hero, just like the countless thousands of spouses past and present who endured that separation. So I'm grateful for her. Finally, I'd like to say a few words about love of country. The United States of America is a great country. It's a wonderful, wonderful country. We are so fortunate to be here. I would go so far as to say that we are blessed to be here in America. We really are. Now, to be certain, we have our problems, okay? As a professor of public policy, I'm acutely aware of the problems. Anybody who's lived through this economy over the last several years understands the problems. And sometimes when I'm looking out over the landscape and feel myself starting to get a little bummed out, I think on the words of President John F. Kennedy, who once said that, most of our problems are man-made. Therefore, they can be solved by man. Those words give me a great deal of comfort. Just as a side note, as the 20th anniversary of the air campaign in the Gulf War was approaching, I decided on a whim just to send a copy of my book down to the man who was my commander-in-chief at the time, President George H.W. Bush, at his office in Houston, Texas. Not wanting anything, not expecting anything. Not even sure, with the Secret Service screening everything, if it would even get to the president. And I simply wrote on the inside, "Dear Mr. President, I was proud to serve under you in the first Gulf War. Thank you for being my Commander-in-Chief. Love, Steve." No, I'm just kidding. No, it was, sincerely, Steve. And about 3 weeks later, I go down to my mailbox and I pulled out a letter from Houston, Texas. A personal note from President Bush, and it said, "Dear Steve, Barbara and I are really honored to have a signed copy of your book. I was proud to be your Commander-in-Chief." Now that's pretty cool, y'all. That is pretty cool, and I know the President has had some health issues, but he's somebody I admire greatly, and as I understand it, he's planning to make a parachute jump for his 90th birthday next year, so more power to him. But just to wrap up, because of that love of country, if we ever find ourselves in a place where my service is needed, an out-of-shape 50-year-old man with a bad knee, with the surgery scars to prove it, if we get to that point again, I would be there without a moment's hesitation. I'd strap on the old tanker boots and rock and roll, because I believe there are some things worth fighting for. There are indeed some things worth dying for. And the way of life we have here in America certainly qualifies as one of those things. We dedicate the book to all of those who wait, wonder, worry, and pray for loved ones in harm's way. And it is for anybody who's ever been separated by circumstance from somebody that they love. With that, I will say thank you for this opportunity again, and God bless the United States of America.
Yeah, we have time for a question. Anybody have a question?
Where can we buy the book?
I happen to have a few with me. But you can also get it on Amazon or BarnesandNoble.com. But I do have, and I'll be happy to sign it for you if you want one. What other questions? This is my favorite part, so if anybody has any questions, I'll be happy to address them. Sir.
My daddy served in World War I, World War II, and the Korean War. I served in the Korean War and Vietnam, and I have to tell you, all the things you said today, and I won't tell you the story about my little son over here when he was 3 when I came back from Vietnam, number 6 child, and he said to his mother, after all my other kids loved me, he had been the hero for a year while I was gone. He said, "When's he going home?" I have to tell you, I'm proud of him because he's a colonel in the Army Reserve and he served in Afghanistan. And I don't know why the hell I'm bragging, but you made a great speech.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for your service.
I enjoyed it, and all the things you said are damn right.
I appreciate it, sir. What else? You're making it too easy for me. Well, I will, if I may, sir, I'd make one quick announcement just for anybody who's interested. We made a decision when the book got published that we would donate a percentage of all proceeds to an organization called the Fisher House, which helps the families of wounded war veterans. So we do believe in giving back. So,
That was excellent, Stephen, and on behalf